Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Energy Newsbeat podcast. My name's Stu Turley, president of Sandstone Group. I'll tell you what, today solar is getting an absolute beating in the news today, and I have two of my favorite Substack authors here. I've got not just I've got these Energy Bad Boys. I've got Isaac and Mitch rolling here today. How are you guys today?
Great.
Doing awesome. Thanks for having us, Stu. It's always fun to be here.
I'll tell you what, Mitch, I got to work on your people skills. Great.
Short and to the point.
That I love. And you know what? I got to give you guys a shout out. I love Alex Epstein, and I absolutely love him. He's been a guest on the podcast 3 or 4 times. Love him. And I was reading his article, and I noticed he used one of your graphics. Well done, guys.
Did you notice it because our logo is large and obnoxious?
No, I actually recognized the logo. I loved it, but I sent a note to my staff and I said, we got to copy what the Energy Bad Boys are doing because they're doing it right. So we're going to be redirecting all of our stuff. Great job. I tell you what, when we talk about that, you guys just put out a wind and solar fanboys are big sad, which means the new IRA subsidy repeal must be pretty good. Give us your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, it's been kind of a saga over the last week or so. Like a lot of people in the energy industry say it feels like decades went by in the span of a week last week because we started the week with a proposal from the House Ways and Means Committee on Reconciliation that was basically not a very good proposal in terms of ending the wind and solar subsidies. It was a continuation of the status quo, and that got the Mitch and I riled up a little bit. So we wrote this piece saying that the GOP's phase out plan for the IRA subsidies isn't good enough. And we just went through the reasons why. It seems like for the longest time, the GOP has kind of seen these subsidies for wind and solar as a giveaway or some way to brandish their credentials with moderate voters. And that was a trade they were willing to make for a really long time. And maybe that wasn't such a bad calculation 10 or 20 years ago when wind and solar were such a small part of the grid in terms of generation. But as they've been subsidized and grown, they've become more threatening to the reliability of the grid and they've increased costs. So rather than this being a budgetary issue, we wanted the policymakers, so members of the House, members of the Senate, to understand that this is now a grid reliability issue, and we are subsidizing the destruction of the reliability of our electric grid if we continue these IRA subsidies. So we came out with this piece. Mitch came up with this awesome graph. So a lot of times our process is I'll start writing a piece and then Mitch will come in and he'll write some, and then we kind of do some back and forth. When I was looking through the piece, because Mitch had actually started that one, scrolling through, reading through it, and I see this graph that you mentioned earlier, and I just say, holy crap, this is awesome. This is exactly what is missing from the debate about the IRA subsidies. And Mitch, I don't know if you want to describe your own graph, but it was that to me, I even sent Mitch a text message hey, awesome job on this.
Right. And, I just made that because I was looking through the piece. And I was like, it really needs a graph in here. It's too wordy. We need a graph. And I thought a timeline looking like that would kind of tell the story in one graph. This thing has been extended time and time again, 11 times since 1999. And we just need to see that to show kind of the absurdity of another phase out.
Yeah, and Stu, for context, you're an old man. You probably don't remember 1992, all that. It probably just blends together with all the other years of your long and storied life. But my favorite
Moses
show
and I are buddies.
Yeah, so you and Joe Biden went to the same school.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, I still don't depend on things.
Yeah, that's great. But my favorite show in 1992 was Sesame Street, and Mitch wasn't born yet. So these subsidies have been around for a really long time. Wow. And we've always been told that they are temporary, but they never go away. So are they really temporary? So that's why last week Monday, House comes out with a bill that is not very good, extends the subsidies through 2032. And so they start phasing out in 2028, finally phase out in 2032 after the next administration is done with their first term, which is just insane to think about. Then they come back Thursday morning and last Thursday morning, and they say they do an excellent job, right? So they basically say, unless you are starting to do this facility within 60 days after the passage of this bill, you will not get IRA subsidies. It has to be service by December 31st of 2028, or you get no subsidies. And that's for wind and solar. And they gave nuclear a little bit of a longer lead time in order to start construction, which is smart. I mean, essentially, nuclear is a fledgling industry again in this country because we didn't build any reactors for a really long time. So that's why the wind and solar fanboys were very upset about the IRA budget that the House Ways and Means came out, and that made us really happy because when bad things happen to when bad things happen to bad people, like that puts a smile on our face.
You know, Mitch, your graphic skills are fantastic, but this graphic down here was just one from SEIA that I'm looking at on one of your articles, and it really pointed out to your article, your comment, Isaac, is that nuclear takes an average of almost 15 and a half years. But here's where I was looking at some of your points on this. Photo and batteries and onshore wind are the shortest. However, there's 24,000 backed projects in the United States to get attached to the grid. So even that number is not accurate in that graph because of the waiting line, if you would, in order to get it done. On the bill, I am not aware, but are they going to be able to, because the wind systems were using the Porculus bill and the Inflation Reduction Act to replace turbines 3 years early, a year early, and all this kind of stuff. And that's where they were making their money. So instead of it's a nameplate upgrade and they're going out and ripping that thing out if it breaks, and then they're saying, oh, we're upgrading it and they get extra money in, is all that going to go away?
That's what we're not sure about, Stu.
Okay.
So I think that the 60-day window from the passage of the bill is going to limit a lot of that kind of like tomfoolery from happening. So the way that the production tax credit works is the wind facility or solar, if they elect to get it, can get that subsidy for 10 years after the facility is placed into service. And then if they decide to repower that facility, which is like putting new blades on, switching out gearbox parts, then they requalify for the subsidy. So a lot of times we're seeing like a wind turbine supposed to last for 20 years. We're seeing that average repower time come in around 12 to 15 years. And that's all from like U.S. Department of Energy data. So
all public. Yeah, Isaac, you're spot on. And I didn't mean to cut you off. I've seen 4 years on actual solar and wind farm data, nothing public. I mean, this is kind of like, I can't tell because the whistleblower would like shoot me. So,
Sure.
You know, you sit back and go, this is not accurate. Man.
But we all know 20 years is baloney. So
I'm going to go with 4.
Yeah. So
and some people even try to get away with saying 30 or 35 years for some of the solar farms, and we know that that's just not accurate at all.
Now, also, what do you guys think about that article that came out last week about the Chinese grid equipment and being able to hack on all of their stuff? I've been writing about this for years, about the Biden administration put back into the grid 490 major grid interconnects that can be shut down remotely by the Chinese. But boy, all of this solar stuff, the stuff was found on all of these articles out there were just nuts about in this article, you talk and bring out the great point that is it 80% of the solar capacity for manufacturing is in China. That's a problem. But then they put these crappy little chips in there that can shut them down. I'm wondering if that's not what happened in Spain when you consider that they lost power for 3 seconds on the Iberia Peninsula, that something didn't trigger that loss of electricity, even though it was 60% of wind and solar. They lost it for 3 seconds, and then all of a sudden 55 million people are without power. Oops.
Yeah, as if solar needed another way of crashing the grid down. They can do that on their own, and now we have China helping us.
I mean, it to me is just amazing when you sit back and take a look at that, because the whole mess of that, unless you've got the money and you want to get off the grid permanently, solar does not make sense to the grid to me.
No, not at all. I mean, other people talk about this. Meredith Angwin talks about this all the time.
Is he cool?
Yeah, she's amazing. Very, very smart. And she talks about this all the time, that if you have an energy source or a power plant that takes up 10% of your grid and that comes crashing down, all of a sudden you're SOL. And, you can think of, in a region, solar and wind, all the fleet, the entire fleet acts as that big power plant, because when the wind goes down or when the wind stops, that entire fleet of wind stops. It's a giant power plant. And if you have a 10%, penetration level of wind or solar, and they just stop completely, all of a sudden you're in some troubling times, just as what happened in ERCOT, what happened in Spain. And so, yeah, it's not a smart decision to make this like a baseload energy source.
No, that's the most I've heard you speak, man.
Because I didn't jump in to answer the question. I made Mitch do it.
You notice both Isaac and I are over here just in awe. This is cool. That was really good. Well done. But Doug Sheridan also pointed out those same kind of things in his article and validated everything that you just said. So he must have been having a time machine listening to this conversation.
I mean, that checks out.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you sit back and take a look at this, where are you guys going on the next article? What is your next article coming around the corner?
Oh, we don't have to know that until Saturday. So no, we got a couple of different opportunities. We did some modeling for an outfit in Arizona, looking at the integrated resource plan cost of Arizona Public Service.
Nice.
So we could write about that. So a congressman tweeted out the graphic. So Alex Epstein shared our graphic on the extension of the production tax credit with members of Congress. And one of them said that he used that graphic to help kill the subsidies, in that second round of negotiations. Yeah, he tweeted it out. And we're like, should we just write something tooting our own horn this weekend? And we're like,
yes.
I mean, we feel like we can include it in something, but to just have that be the only thing in the article feels too self-promotional. So well, maybe it's not.
Guys, you guys have worked really hard to build a great Substack channel. And when somebody is out there tooting your horn, you need to say, thank you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, so it was wild. He said, this past week, I showed this graphic, thank you, Alex Epstein, to countless people in the Republican conference as why we had to make sure the solar and wind tax credits begin to expire during President Trump's time in office. So I was just like, okay, because somebody had sent me this. I was just like, oh, okay, there's our graphic with our giant logo on it. And it's just oh man, that's super cool. The president might have seen our logo.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
And when I just let my marketing folks know and says, we got to follow what the Energy Bad Boys are doing, that's a really cool thing to know that your information is getting to not only the White House, your information is making an impact to consumers in the United States. That is huge. In fact, when I sent you the email to get you on the podcast, I was like, Alex, got your thing out there, and I was like, this is way cool. I'm one of your biggest cheerleaders out here.
Well, and the fact that it was the PTC, I mean, that is the holy grail of policies that you just want to destroy and take down, because it's probably the most destructive piece of policy that we have to deal with. You can do a lot of things at the state level, but with the PTC and the ITC still intact, there's only so much that can get done, even with good strides being made. And so taking that down is absolutely it's a career event, so.
Oh, 100%. We've peaked. Now we need to find new years, because
we're good now. We can start a history Substack now.
You can do something else. Maybe I'll hang drywall for a living or something like that. It's time to walk away. You gotta do the John Elway. You win the Super Bowl, you walk away.
You guys haven't peaked yet. I hate to tell you this. just put all this.
You haven't started a podcast yet, Stu?
Oh yeah, you need to start a podcast. Mitch would be a great podcast because he would not do what Sean Hannity does. Sean Hannity just overrides his guests and just doesn't shut up. Mitch, you don't have that problem.
Nope.
As we sit here with 5 seconds of dead air space, Isaac and I are going, gonna talk.
Well, that's the dynamic. I come in when I got something to say. Isaac is he's the talker, So I make the graphs. So.
No, but you guys are a great team.
and I just like fill space.
You seem like you guys bounce off each other very well.
Oh yeah. Yep. So like when we had our old job, like I'd always try to like make my boss understand how important Mitch was to the team. And I'm like, this is a bicycle. You need both wheels in order for it to work. And like that's it. Like we're like just a very good team in the aspects of the business where I'm really good. That's not always like what Mitch likes to do. And then in the aspects that I'm not good at, like Mitch is very good at them.
Right.
So like that's how it works out. And they always say in business you should, find like a business partner that complements your weaknesses rather than has the same. And like it just so happens that that's how things work for Mitch and I at Always On Energy Research, which is the the think tank that we co-founded, and then also at Energy Bad Boys, which is like our fun side project.
What a fun project. I don't know why I'm sitting here looking at you two and having this conversation of one person outspoken, and there's two groups or two tag team guys, Penn and Teller. I'm sitting here trying to figure out on this one. Or you also have Young Frankenstein, where you have Gene Wilder and the Monster. And when the Monster are tap dancing around there, I would love to see you guys on stage as the Monster and Gene Wilder. You guys, that would be a great graphic next time, is look at Young Frankenstein for some of your graphics there, because I guarantee you guys would make a fantastic pair on there.
Well, let me Google what Young Frankenstein is.
Do what?
I said, let me Google what Young Frankenstein is.
You've never seen
Young Frankenstein? I'm giving you a hard time.
Oh, dude, I am old, but geez.
I mean,
how fun. But now, where do you see, now that you've gotten in front of them, you've got to be able to come up to the next big thing. And I think that Elon was very apropos today when he said the big, beautiful bill can't be big and beautiful because it didn't get all of the Doge cuts, codified. And how do we help the one or two politicians arm themselves with more information? I think is an absolutely wonderful plan. We've got to get your expertise in front of people, because I value your opinion. And I did not mean to give you a compliment. And I am very sorry if I just ruined your day, but you guys are rock stars, just like the Electric Grandma. I love her. She is fantastic as well, too.
Yeah. I mean, thankfully we got people like Alex who we don't have direct channels to a lot of members of Congress. We've got a few people who we've, built relationships with over the years, but that hasn't really been something that we've had the bandwidth to actively pursue. But it does help when people like Alex, who have, made an intentional effort to make that part of his business model, use our materials, and, is able to, score a big win, like the reconciliation package that came out Thursday. So yeah, I mean, that's.
What are your thoughts? I mean, one of the biggest things I've been kind of analyzing the grid and where I see AI data centers and moving around and where the data centers are coming around. I'm starting a new series on the podcast on AI and data centers, and I can see data centers only going into states with natural gas and pipelines. And then all of a sudden you start backing into, all right, who's the Republican governors? And then you start looking into who's the Republican, and you start looking in, there ain't many states where you're going to be having large economic growth through data centers. And you could probably guess Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and you're looking at Texas. And I'm like, I'm out of states.
Right. Well, yeah, they're going to look for, what do you say, Isaac?
Well, like Wyoming, North Dakota, like natural gas, Republican governors, like.
Yeah, but you look at the growth of new natural gas power plants, they're not even permitted yet up there. And there's a waiting list of, and I compared this against the natural gas power plants coming online, because if you haven't bought them in the last 2 years, there's a waiting line for new natural gas turbines. It's kind of like, oh,
yeah.
And Steve Reese has been absolutely wonderful about pointing out, Steve Reese Consulting, who does a lot of the natural gas monitoring in the United States and stuff with his firm, they help data centers and that kind of stuff. But he has really pointed out very appropriately that we're almost getting too much natural gas on the grid. You can have too much of one source.
Right.
Well, that's why we need more beautiful, clean coal on the grids. Who's responsible for the dead air?
Me choking. Excuse me, because I thought that was really funny. All we need is some big, beautiful. Can we do a moment of silence for my Trump imitation as I go? We need big, beautiful coal. I don't know if I sound like Fonzie, Fuzzy, or
it sounds like he's Italian. He's like, we need the big, beautiful coal.
The big, beautiful coal. That ain't no Trump. That ain't no Putin. It's an Italian guy looking for coal.
Yeah, exactly. For his pizzeria.
Yeah, Scooby. But, you sit back and take a look. Coal is not dead yet.
Well, no, and the administration wants to revive it in a real way. I mean, no, but honestly, Stu, from what I've heard, like they're willing to put billions of federal dollars into revamping old coal plants or maybe building new ones. So if you're going to do that, I think Wyoming's back on the table, West Virginia.
Great point.
I mean, North Dakota has a bunch of lignite, which, some people say lignite is flammable dirt. I say that's good enough for me. So, like, you've got Montana, huge coal reserves. So, Utah would also be potential. Like, we've got a lot of resources in that respect.
Yep.
And then, like, Ohio seems like they'd be a good data center place too, just because, like, they've got the proximity to populations, they've got a Republican governor, legislature, things like that. So like it'll be interesting to see, like, with the reconciliation package, and this is my understanding of it, but they were doing things like charging LNG export terminals $1 million so they could get accelerated permitting. And some people might be like, oh, well, why would you do that? It's so there's a budgetary implication and they can change the rule because it's a budgetary thing. Because like the thing with reconciliation is you can't make policy changes, but you can do things in order to raise revenue for the federal government. So like if they were to do that for data center transmission lines or something like that, or natural gas pipelines, you could potentially get through like some sort of permitting reform that wouldn't otherwise be admissible and that sort of thing. I mean, who knows? Like I don't know how many reconciliation packages you can do in a year. So
considering the rhinos that we have, I'm not putting any bets.
Well, you'll just need to increase the salt deduction, and like that's it. So, like, but yeah.
Let me ask this also: is the big the big beautiful nuclear? Now I'm trying to sound like a Italian Russian. Holy smokes! The big beautiful the big beautiful executive orders on nuclear. That was wonderful. And when I talked to Robert Bryce, David Blackman, and Sandridge this week on the podcast, those guys are rock stars. I love every one of them. But it brought up a great big point, and that is nuclear is years away. Your chart shows 15 and a half years just to get one like kind of cooking. And we sit back and kind of go, is it 15 years? Or they said they can get 3 of them done in 3 years if they build them on federal lands. And I'm sitting there having to read between the lines. Is it because if it's built on a federal land, they can bypass all of the federal regulatory issues around nuclear plants, which is the main reason that we're $35 billion to get a nuclear plant built, and China, whether their information is right or wrong, put one that they've gotten approved for $2.7 billion a piece. I'm over here kind of going, how in the world is this going to happen?
I mean, generally, if you do something on federal land, it's subject to more BS than when you do it on private land, right? That's just the way that it's worked. So I don't know how these executive orders affect like the NEPA process and all of that, because any significant federal action needs to have some sort of a NEPA review. So like, unless they're suspending that, or if they're building it on a military base or something like that, where I'm sure the environmental regulations can be suspended more easily. So like I haven't really had a chance to dive into those executive orders, but it does seem to me like it's kind of counterintuitive that something would be subject to less federal oversight if it's on federal land.
Maybe we have a follow-up podcast next month on this, because this is a big question for me. And this was the first time I've ever seen Robert Bryce and David Blackman and Doug Sandridge. All of us looked at each other and went, because it doesn't make sense, because we're hearing we're going to get 3 nuclear reactors in 3 years. And I'm going, excuse me.
Yeah.
Look at the Energy Bad Boys chart.
Yeah. I mean, so they might be saying like an average of that many years, right? So for the Baraka plant, I believe is Bakara. They're building like 4 nuclear reactors in the United Arab Emirates, and they're the APR 1400s. And they will have built about 4 of those over the next like 16-ish years. So
Right.
the first one took, I think, 10 or so years to build, but the other ones are going a lot faster. So it could be like, they want to build 3 of them over the next 10 years. And
Right.
if you average that out, it's one every third year or so, right? So I don't know if that's what they're doing there, but could be.
Yeah, because you can do some things like we're just out, we don't have the construction workers. So a lot of other people talk about this, that if you start with one, a lot of that time is learning how to construct this, nuclear plant. And then you use that same team ideally to construct the next ones where they already have worked out the kinks and the bugs. And so you can speed up the process that way. The problem is sometimes you have like people building the whole plant and then they don't do anything and have to get new jobs and then they have to relearn again. And so, we're running into that problem where other countries are kind of, leading the way on that and using the same engineers, same construction workers. And so we can mimic that. But the problem with all this, going back to data centers and AI, is that we're playing catch up. We just succumb to almost degrowth or stagnant, growth for so long. And now we have to play catch up. Even building a natural gas plant, we don't have the time. Whereas other countries like China have been building and building and building. They have a step up right now to take on that increased growth from data centers. And so we're in a bad position no matter what you do, because no data center is trying to power their data center with solar and wind. It's just not reliable. You need some type of dispatchable power source available. And we're just 3 steps behind right now.
What AI do you guys use to help do your research? Are you using Chat GPT, Grok, or all the above?
Yeah, I use both of those that you mentioned.
Which one do you?
I like to cross reference. I like to ask them the same question and see what I get for an answer.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
I think I have just learned enough to make sure that I weed through the AI on the response that I get. And what I'm afraid is people will just print crap that goes out on from AI, and it's not necessarily always right.
No.
Well, with that, how do people find you?
All right. You can find us at Always On Energy Research. That's aoenergy.org. And then you can find us on Substack at Energy Bad Boys.
I'll tell you what, I really appreciate both of you, Isaac and Mitch Rolling. Thank you so much for stopping by the podcast today, and look forward to our next one, because I really appreciate you guys, what you're doing for the industry and what you're, just getting the word out there, because congratulations on making a difference. It's not often that you can sit back and go,
Yep.
That's My Logo has made a difference to the average American. And I mean that very wholeheartedly, sincerely. Thank you very much for your service to our country.
Well, thanks for having us. It was a great time.
We'll see you next time.